Welcome to the All Around Joe podcast, where we optimize your human performance from my personal experience as an athlete, coach, and all-around self-improvement junkie. On this edition of the All Around Joe podcast, I am talking with Jonathan Levitt about his rim to rim to rim Grand Canyon adventure. So if that in and of itself does not get you fired up to listen to this podcast, here's a little tidbit that he posted on his social media. Here we go. I conquered my fear of heights and running in the dark. The first 5 miles were pure terror as we descended in the dark around razor-sharp switchbacks with massive drop-offs. My worst nightmare. A few hours later, I got happy legs at mile 28, and that lasted till around mile 35, which is beyond the distance I've ever run before, 50K. Starting up the trail, a 7-mile climb, 11 hours into the day was one of the hardest mental challenges on the whole day. So, without further ado, with one more thing in mind, if you guys would like to get $200 off an Inside Tracker Ultimate package, you can do so by using the code Cheers All Around Joe. That's Cheers All Around Joe. Will get you $200 off an Ultimate package at InsideTracker.com. This is one of the best deals of the year, and it will last through the holiday. So go ahead and hurry over and get yourself $200 off. And now, without further ado, I am honored to have the pleasure of talking with Jonathan Levitt. Here we go. Jonathan, how's it going, man?
It is going well. How about yourself?
I am doing awesome. I am actually in Hawaii right now, and that doesn't even compare to how excited I am, though, to talk with you about your recent adventure. So,
I'm excited for it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Mostly because, I want to hear how it went and hear your experience, and then maybe talk myself into doing it at some point. But, before we hop into the actual adventure, run, event, whatever we're going to call it, can you give us a little bit of background on who you are for people that have not heard of you before? And before you get into that, if you guys want, love this and want to get more information about Jonathan and what he's up to, head over to allaroundjoe.com/187, where we did a podcast all about what he's up to, his podcast, all that fun stuff. So, Jonathan, let us know who you are, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe, for having me on again. My name is John. I live in Boston, or at least my furniture lives in Boston. I love to travel. I'm headed to California next week, and Austin the week after, and Puerto Rico the following week. A couple weeks ago, I was in the Canyon, as we'll talk about. I work at Inside Tracker and have the pleasure of working with athletes and non-athletes every day, all about improving lives and performance and reaching for goals. That's my day-to-day work, which is awesome. And then I trail run, I road run, and I have my own podcast where I explore the why behind what keeps runners motivated and running long distances or short, fast distances and everything in between. So it's fun. I'm part of a coaching group called Some Work, All Play with David Roche, and that's how I live my life.
Very cool. Very cool. And for those of you guys that haven't subscribed to Jonathan's podcast already, you should. It's called For the Long Run. So make sure that you get up on that, and it will be in the show notes as well here at 222 if you're looking for links afterwards. So I'm curious, Jonathan, because you do so much. And just so you guys know, I didn't share any of the questions with Jonathan this time around. So he's just shooting from the hip here, which is awesome. I love it.
My style. I love it.
Yeah. So if somebody runs into you on the street or as quote unquote on the elevator, what is your pitch to them? Like, you've got 30 seconds. How do you explain to them who you are? Or like the first time somebody meets you, because you've got so much, like this laundry list of cool things you're doing.
Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't found myself pitching myself on Shark Tank yet, so I haven't necessarily refined my personal elevator pitch, but I've got the elevator pitch down for all the stuff that I do individually. Um, short short explanation. I love helping people get better. I love the process of getting better. I love exploring boundaries and crushing them. A lot of the stuff I've done in the last year, a lot of it has been accomplishments or things that I, 5 years ago would have not ever thought possible or even close to attainable. And I just love the discovery process of reestablishing these normal expectations, or the process of reestablishing what normal is for an individual.
That's really cool. So why did you have different expectations 5 years ago?
I was really just getting into running and training 5 years ago. I've been running maybe for 6 years now, and I didn't really know what was ahead, and I didn't know what might be possible. I didn't know that people ran more than a marathon. I didn't know that average people ran lots of marathons or ultras. I didn't even know what ultras were. The concept of running across the Grand Canyon would have been wild to me, and running back would be even more wild. So it's really, like I said, it's just like I've gone down this rabbit hole of I have a lot of friends that have run 100 miles a lot of times in a day or 2 days, and it's reestablishing these limits that we set for ourselves, and really finding out what you're made of when shit hits the fan.
I love it. It's so cool. You learn so much about yourself.
Totally.
It's awesome. So I can't wait any longer. Let's jump into the rim to rim to rim. Actually, first of all, what is it? When someone says, oh, you went to the Grand Canyon, did the rim to rim to rim. I mean, most people, when I bring it up, they're like, oh, the rim to rim. And I'm like, no, the rim to rim to rim.
Yeah.
And then you have to explain it to them. So like, how do you explain it to somebody?
So 1% of the people that visit the Grand Canyon actually go beyond the rim. So 1% of people go more than 10 minutes into the canyon. And the Grand Canyon is so insanely large that you can't grasp how big it is until you get to the bottom. And I had been there before, and it basically looks like a green screen. It looks like art, and it doesn't look real. I'll tell you, by running 5,000 feet downhill over 7 miles and finding yourself at the bottom, it becomes real. and it becomes real pretty quick. And the gravity of just how large it is really presents itself when you're in there. So what is rim to rim to rim? Rim to rim to rim is starting from one side of the Grand Canyon and running across to the other side and then back. So opposite of trail running generally, where you go up and then you go down when you're on a mountain. With the canyon, you go down and then you go up. So it's a false sense of security and a false sense of like, oh, cool, I feel great. Because for every step you take at the beginning, it's 2 steps going back. And then you do that again. So the way it works is it's 40 plus miles, between 42 and 50, depending on the route you take there and back. And most people don't do that entirely in the daylight. So you start super early and you finish before sunset or after sunset. So the first descent you do in the dark most of the time. And I'm afraid of heights and I don't like night running. And so the experience of combining both of those was like, I just got the hard part out of the way right off the bat. Because it's 5 a.m., it's dark, and you got 45 miles ahead of you. It's time to go.
Yep.
So we dropped in, and I immediately lost the pack, like right from the start. There were 15 of us, and I was like, I got to go real slow. So I was doing 20-minute downhill miles for the first 7 miles or 6.5 miles because I was just terrified. of, so have you been in the canyon?
I've only been to the rim, so I have not been down into it.
So if you look at the trail, it's like, I don't know, 3 feet wide, 3.5 feet wide. And there are spots where, you're doing 180-degree turns. And if you miss a turn, you're dead. Like you'll fall off and drop 500 to 1,000 feet. And that's it. There's like no undo on that. So it's these razor sharp switchbacks with massive drop offs as a way to get started. And so it was cool thinking. I very vividly remember thinking, normally you get the stuff you're not looking forward to towards the end of a run, and your flaws are exposed, your weaknesses are exposed, in the third quarter,
Yep.
basically. My flaws and weaknesses were exposed right from the start. And it was super cool because I knew that once I got through that, um, the hardest mental part for me would be over, or so I thought. But yeah, it was pretty wild to start, and that's a very long way to answer what is rim to rim to rim.
Oh man, but it is. Oh, it's cool. It's really interesting to have to face that. So like, what happened then after? Just because I'm curious, like, at what point were you going down, and did you kind of like make amends with being okay and overcome that fear, or did it take you to get through it at 20-minute miles, and then you started speeding up once you hit the bottom?
Yeah, I didn't get through it until I got through it.
Okay.
It was just like, you're going to deal with this, and there's no turning back. It's not an option. It literally wasn't, because the car that dropped us off was driving to the North Rim. So there was nobody there that could pick me up at 5 a.m. And all my friends were ahead of me. So I needed to keep going. And um, it was very like primal. Like I had no other option besides continuing forward.
Did you meditate? What did you do?
I pretty much just prayed that I wouldn't fall off the cliff. Like
Okay.
I sort of joke about that, but it was like a very real concern that like I would blow a turn and fling myself right off. No, I knew that sunrise was coming. I knew that as I continued to descend, the switchbacks would change, and I'd eventually get to the river. And once you get to the river, it's flat or downhill, or you could fall 10 feet and survive.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before in terms of like actually being scared.
Cool. So let's paint the picture here. Was it pitch black and you had a headlamp on, so you
Yeah.
just couldn't see where these cliffs were going, kind of a thing?
Yeah. So the wild part is we came back up that same trail, and in the daylight, so about 5 o'clock. So we started at 5 a.m. and we came back up that climb starting at probably 3 p.m.
Okay.
And I said to my friend that I was with at the time, I was like, thank God it was in the dark, because I don't know that I would have gone down this had I been able to see it. So yeah, we were using headlamps, but that's illuminating what's around you,
Yeah.
but not what's 1,000 feet below you. So for all I could see, um, I just had a trail that I had to follow, and that's really all that I did. But then as the sun started to come up, the you could see where you came from and how
Right.
high it was.
Right. Cool. Well, we're going to circle back to this, but I want to jump to what sparked you to get into this, or to like think I want to do this craziness?
So we were talking about this. My friend Tony is a good friend of mine who lives in San Francisco, and he's the one that organized this trip. And I had forgotten how this started, and he reminded me, because what he said was, I want to see national parks. And I was like, oh, we should go to the Grand Canyon. And then we told the third person about this, and they mentioned rim to rim. And then we told a fourth person, and they mentioned rim to rim to rim. So we had this Google Doc where people were inputting what they were going to do. So like number of rims was a column. So 2 or 3 or 6. Nobody did 6. 2 or 3. So rim to rim or rim to rim to rim.
Okay.
And I put 2. I put 2 initially. So just rim to rim. And somewhere around May or June, after I had recovered from the marathon I did earlier in the year, I was thinking about it and I was like, I could comfortably go to the canyon tomorrow and do rim to rim. I probably shouldn't do that. And I probably shouldn't commit to rim or something that I'm comfortable with right now. So I mentioned it to my coach and he was like, adventures, yes, love it, great. In typical David Roche fashion, I
Yep.
support whatever you want to do as long as it's not too stupid. And I was like, let's do it. Like I don't know what that's going to be like. I don't know if it's even attainable. So I put it in my training log as a goal and didn't think much of it and sort of wrote it as a joke, like not actually expecting that my training would allow me to do such a thing. I don't know why I thought that, but it would at that point, and we talked about it on the podcast that I did with David, sort of debriefing it from a functional and um, mental standpoint. Like it was so incomprehensible to me, even in June, to consider running rim to rim to rim, and that's why I chose to do it, because I wanted to see what would happen if I did something so outside of my wheelhouse and so outside of my comfort zone, and in a place where you really don't have an option to fail. Like failure in the Grand Canyon costs you $15,000, and I say that because that's the only there are 2 ways to get out. You can run or hike or walk, or you can take a $15,000 helicopter ride. Those are the only 2 options, and you have to pick one. So it was, again, primal. Like we did this, we got into this, we have to get out of it.
So at this point, had you done, or when you're having these thoughts, had you done your ultra?
Yeah, so I had run a 50K in the fall prior. So my longest time on feet was that day, and that was 7 hours.
Yeah.
And we did that on Tahoe, so it was a lot of climbing. And our time from the South Rim to the North Rim was just under 7 hours. So I arrive at the North Rim having already run basically my longest time on feet ever, thinking that now I need to double that. And I remember the oh shit moment of dropping back in on the north side after we had, taken some time to refuel and rehydrate and eat some snacks and stuff. And I was like, man, this is about to get interesting. I don't know what's going to happen in these next, 5 to 8 hours. And it was just this fear mixed with like pure stoke that it's like it was euphoric, and it was like a high that I had never felt before. So we had 17 people with us, and one of them was or is a pro athlete. Her name is Anna Mae Flynn, and so it was cool to have her around because she had done the canyon before. She actually ran in it 2 days prior, among other times, and she was the first person I saw when I climbed out of the North Rim. And she's standing there getting ready. She was running north to south. And she told me later, she's like, I had no clue what to expect from you. And when I saw her, like, I just started screaming. I was like, can we swear on this podcast?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So my license plate on the car that we rented it started with LFG. So Let's Fucking Go became like the anthem of the trip.
Nice.
And so we see each other and we just start screaming this in this parking lot at 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning with like kids and stuff around and all that. I was just so fired up. And I had been running for 7 hours, and it was like nothing I had ever experienced before. I was on a runner's high for 10 hours. And it was like I said, it was like nothing I had ever experienced before, because everything I was doing and every step I took was new territory, and I felt so good. And that just kept me so fired up.
So I want to jump back real quick to your thought process when you wrote down this goal, and you had mentioned that you weren't sure if it was humanly possible. What did you think would happen? And the reason that I'm asking this is because I'm sure that tons of people can relate. And they're
Yeah,
like,
so definitely humanly possible. I wasn't sure that I could be that human that did it. So when I put it on the calendar and David didn't say anything about it, I knew that he knew how to get me there.
yeah.
And I knew that if I just trusted his process and our process, that I'd be fine. And I knew that if it wasn't something that I should physically do this year, he would have told me, and or he would have made some comment about like, oh, this is super awesome, like maybe do this next year. But he didn't. And so that gave me the confidence to get after it from a training perspective. And I had kept having breakthrough after breakthrough in training that just like kept me motivated to continue on. Like I ran a marathon by myself on a Saturday morning at at a mountain in Massachusetts, 3 weeks out of the canyon. And it took 5.5 hours. It was 5,000 feet of climbing. And I get to mile 22, mile 20, and I'm running by myself at this point. And I'm like, this is insane. Like, I feel so good. And I was doing all this climbing, and it wasn't an easy run by any means. And it was at that point when I hit that mile 20. Actually, it was when I hit mile 20. I was like, this Grand Canyon thing is gonna happen. I was like, if I feel this good 4 hours or 4.5 hours into like a solo long run, I'd actually run 16 miles with a friend, but at this point I was solo. I was like, if I feel this good, on just like a casual Saturday where I'm, that was my second longest time on feet run ever. Um, I was like, if I feel this good, like anything is possible with time. Um, and it was in that moment that I decided that, this was probably going to happen.
So let's dig into the training a little bit. What did it look like leading up to that? And even like if you've got to go back further to let us know how you built up your body to get it to be able to do the training, go ahead and do that.
So I've been working with David now for like a year and a half. And it's been, so I went through a marathon cycle with him in the spring, and it was really just base building from January until March, until like, end of March, when he was like, hey, you're pretty fit. Like, do you want to race a marathon? Um, so we had like a 6-week marathon, like specific cycle, but it was really just base building and putting in a lot of miles, non-specific training, just lots of aerobic time and speed work, lots of easy miles. And then I raced the marathon. I recovered super well from the marathon. I was running within 3 days, which I really don't, 4 days, which I really don't recommend unless you had a similar situation. I've taken 21 days off post marathon before. But I came out of this marathon and it was like a fitness bump, and I felt so good. And so I trained. I recovered. I went super easy for the next few weeks, but then I started doing some trail running. And I was out in Boulder, I was in Tahoe, and the miles started picking up. And it got to a point where I was like casually running 60-mile weeks and not like in training 60-mile weeks. And it just like felt natural to click off 60 miles. But a year ago, 60 was my peak. And that I touched that probably a handful of times in the year. So this past summer, I was probably averaging 66 to 68 miles a week. And I hit 70 and 72 and 73 a couple of times. So it was really just about building up as many miles as I can without doing too much. I was doing like eight to 10 easy on Tuesday. I do a workout with a double on Wednesday. So looking at, it was between 10 and 13 miles in the morning and between 3 and 6 in the afternoon. Thursday was 8 to 10. Friday was 4 or off. Saturday was started at 14 and then made its way up to the full marathon distance. And then Sunday was 10 to 13 with Monday being off. So that adds up quick. And
Yeah.
I layered week after week of consistency, which enabled me to, keep seeing these breakthroughs from a fitness standpoint. I was crushing these workouts and I was going super slow on the easy miles. Um, I started run commuting with coworkers, so they're getting a little speed work. I'm getting recovery, like talking 9-minute miles, 9 15-minute miles, which I would run Thursdays and Fridays. And I think that was huge. Like finally slowing down for my recovery runs has made a huge impact on being able to, rip it when I want to. I had a friend who tweeted today. She was like, Keely Henninger, who's a elite trail runner, and she tweeted that she had a friend that was, creeping on her Strava and said, Keely, you're really slow, except when you want to be fast. And it's like, yeah, that is exactly it. So I'm running 9-minute easy runs, but I ran a marathon at a 650 pace. And so it's that major difference that, like, this is the healthiest I've ever been. And this is the most fired up I've ever been. And the stoke meter is a pretty good indicator of training status, in terms of, you can look at testosterone, but it's probably, on the same scale. Like if you're fired up and you're excited to train, it means you're recovering. It means you're going easy when you need to go easy, and it means you're ready to perform when it's actually time to go hard. And so I also have data that shows that I'm trained well and recovered, and my testosterone levels are great, my cortisol is great, inflammation, all that. So I have the objective data to validate that this approach of lots and lots of easy miles and some fast miles is working really well for me. But then I also have that, I just want to go. Like I'm ready, let's go. And that's a pretty good indicator of, are you doing too much, or are you in a good zone? Um, so yeah, we just kept building, mile after mile, and layering these quality weeks on top of each other. Then I spent 12 days in Boulder and got the benefit of using the terrain out there as it should be used. So David had this pretty awesome hill workout that he had me do up Mount Sanitas, if anyone's familiar with that. And Boulder offers this unique training ground where any type of workout you have, there's a place and trail for that.
Nice.
So we did this workout, which was, I think it was 6 by 3 minutes with 3 minutes recovery. So 2 minutes on, 3 minutes recovery. But in the recovery, I kept going uphill. So it felt like doing 400s, because it was the same output, basically, or same intended output, but I was going 25% less distance, and it was going uphill. And then I continued going uphill on the recovery. So you get to this, summit, and it's like you work so freaking hard to get up there. So that was super cool. So I had the benefit of training in Boulder for 12 days. I was out there for work, but also lots of fun and podcast recording. So then I come back and I feel like $1 million because I've been at 5,000 feet for 2 weeks, doing most of my runs at above 7,300 feet. So physically I felt great. And then I jumped into the peak train, or I came down for a week, in volume, and then hit my 2 peak weeks or 2 highest weeks, and those went super well. And then I tapered and then hit the canyon.
Wow. So you mentioned that you were tracking some data and your stoke meter. What exactly does that entail for you? Because, obviously you work for Inside Tracker and you can get all of that data. And I thought it was really interesting that you mentioned the stoke meter, because I feel like it's really something that people, at least athletes that are trying to work really hard at something, don't pay enough attention to. But
Totally.
I'd love to hear about all the data points that you were tracking.
Yeah. So there's the objective and there's a subjective. Objectively, I'm using blood analysis to understand the impact of training and nutrition. And then it tells me exactly what to do. So are you training too hard? Are you not training enough? Are you missing supplements that you should be taking? Are there certain foods you should be eating? That's all of what Inside Tracker is telling. And so I'm looking at testosterone, I'm looking at cortisol, I'm looking at inflammation, and some muscle damage markers, and then specific nutrient levels like vitamin D, magnesium, things like that facilitate sleep and muscle repair and just feeling good in general. So I can compare. I've been testing, or I'm working and testing at Inside Tracker for 5 years now. So I can compare in training versus another in training test. And I can compare what feeling good looks like objectively to how I feel now, and understand how to manipulate training or sleep or nutrition based on what the blood work is showing. And so at the core, Inside Tracker tells you what to do from a diet, supplementation, and lifestyle perspective. Subjectively, if you wake up feeling good, that's great. That's a great indicator of, for men, testosterone levels. It's a great indicator that you're not overtraining, and that's the ideal. So I really became selfish with sleep over the last year, and so I'm putting in 70-mile weeks, but I'm sleeping 8.5 to 9 hours a night, and I'm recovering, and I'm doing social things with friends, but I'm in bed at 9 o'clock. So that was a big shift. And that's got me to where I am today. And I think that the like you said, the stoke meter portion is overlooked. Like a lot of times people, I see it all the time on Twitter, that people complain all the time about having to train. It's like, you don't have to train. You don't have to do that workout. Nobody is forcing you to do that. You chose to run New York City Marathon. You chose to run, Boston Marathon. You chose to run Western States, whatever. Um, if you're loathing a workout, maybe take a step back and think about why that is.
Yeah.
Life stress contributes to your lack of desire to train, just like training stress does. So if you have the luxury of manipulating things in your life or changing around some variables in your life that contribute to being able to sleep more, or you know so David follows this philosophy of, you either run more or you sleep more. And so you don't always need to go for that run. And so a lot of times people are waking up super early to go for a run before a super important meeting.
Yeah.
But maybe on that day you should sleep in. Or maybe you don't need to go for your double. Or maybe you don't need to do this workout today, but instead you should run 30 minutes easy or 45 minutes easy instead of doing a 90-minute workout. And I think that having the grace and ability to change on the fly or deviate from the plan is powerful and empowering, and allows you to continue to get better. Jesse Thomas, who's a pro triathlete and is the CEO of a major company, Picky Bars. he had a line. So he trains a lot and works a lot. He had a line about, and I'll butcher the actual line, but basically he said a plan is just a plan, and you should be able to deviate from the plan. Um, Again, we should probably look up the quote because it's great, and that delivery wasn't. But at the end of the day, like, a plan is just a plan. You don't have to follow it, and it's good to not follow it sometimes when life comes up. And so that's the kind of grace I've given myself in the last year that has allowed me to reach levels I've never reached before, both physically and professionally. We're doing things at Inside Tracker or I'm doing things at Inside Tracker I've never done before. We're doing things at Inside Tracker we've never done before. And um, it's a balance between trying to do it all the time. Like, when I first started working, I would work till 11 p.m. every night, because if you weren't working till 11 p.m., you were slacking. Um, and that was just like that's what I thought. And everyone's got this fascination of being busy all the time. And so I've become selfish with my time, because I know that if I am, I'm more productive.
Yep.
So, and I talked about this on another podcast. Like, I literally work like mountain time hours on the East Coast. I'll sleep later than most and start my run later than most and get into work later than most. But I know that because I do that, I'm more productive as a result, and I can do the training. And I believe that my training allows me to be better at my job.
Yep.
So it's important for me to get the training in. It's important for me to get the work in. And I think that this flexibility, not flexibility, but this, maybe flexibility or
Philosophy, maybe.
philosophy, I guess, has been beneficial versus wasting my time,
Yeah.
And being irresponsible with time.
Sure. I feel the same way, and I feel like I've found something similar to what you're talking about with being more deliberate in what I'm doing and not having to work as many hours and putting more time in, or focus time into what I'm doing, not worrying about like what other people are thinking about, like, you need to work 10 hours a day to run a business or what.
Right. Exactly.
How many times or how often during your training cycle were you testing with Inside Tracker? And then how often were you was it a daily stoke meter that you were looking for?
So with Inside Tracker, I think I tested in January, and then I probably tested right after the Providence Marathon, which was fascinating because, like I said, I PR'd by 20 minutes and finally broke 3 for the first time ever, and something I was trying to do for 4 years. And my results were great, and I felt great. So I returned to running fairly quickly. I tested again probably in August as training had picked up a little bit more. And then I tested again in September because I wanted to see the impact of altitude.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tested again after the canyon. I may have tested in October. It was either August. Yeah, it was August and October. I believe early October or September. It was one of those two. Basically an in training test, and then I tested post canyon. And after testing after the Grand Canyon, it showed muscle damage at levels I'd never seen before. You can attribute that to the downhill running, 11,000 feet of downhill running. And I was able to eat my way to recovery. So there are foods that facilitate better levels of inflammation, and I was doing all of that stuff, and there were supplements you can take that were recommended to really expedite this process. Because I paced a half marathon this past weekend, and that was a week or 8 days after the canyon, and I felt amazing, and I was so fired up in the middle of that half marathon that I was like, I just want to rip a 5K right now. So talk about the stoke meter. The stoke meter was high this past weekend. And so I took that as a great indicator of where I'm at. because I've got a 50K coming up in a week and a half, and then I'll shut it down for the season. But yeah, I mean, I joke about this Stoke meter. It's just like every so often I catch myself, really hyped and like really excited to get out there for a long day or a big workout. And I think it's just important to recognize those signs and celebrate it. Like if you feel that good, great. That's like that should be celebrated. And so it was super exciting to continue to have that feeling as the year has gone on.
Yeah. So how much do you attribute to feeling good this year, or how much of feeling good this year do you attribute to having tested and knowing what your body needs in the past years?
Yeah, so it's a lot. It's been a long process to get to where I'm at. And I really started paying more attention to the Insight Tracker guidance maybe 2.5 years ago. And things have been improving ever since then. I've taken a greater emphasis. I put a greater emphasis on sleep. I have been eating more and working with a therapist, and that's been huge too. So I think the combination of those three things has really allowed me to get the most out of the work that I'm putting in. Specifically, at the start of 2018, maybe I had a conversation with one of our dietitians, and she said, "You're not eating enough." Looking at some of the blood work, it's a combination of the testosterone and cortisol and lipids, and she said, "Add 5,000 calories, add 500 calories a day, and see how you feel." And ever since then, I've like leveled up in terms of recovery and energy levels. And I wasn't unintentionally fueling, but I was probably running 50 miles a week at the time and not taking in enough for what I was putting out. And so that was a very black and white shift where as soon as I started doing that, I started feeling better. So, like I said, maybe 2.5 years ago or a year and a half ago, I got more serious about it, and I was like, "What else can I do? What can help me get the most out of this?" And that was a big change, and it's definitely had a huge impact.
Cool. Let's talk about the fueling for the run. What did you fuel with, and then how did you determine at what intervals to take the fuel?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's something I was worried about. Basically, how long could I continue to fuel? So the morning of, I woke up at 4:15 and had a coffee and a picky bar and a stroopwafel, a goo stroopwafel. So it was only 300 calories to start the day. And then in the bus ride or the car ride over, van ride over, I had another stroopwafel pretty much right before the start. So then we started, and about 45 minutes later, I had my first gel of the day. And from that point on, literally every 30 minutes, I was having a gel. And I had a mix of their Goose Roctane, so more BCAAs, more sodium, some caffeine. So I probably had like 12 cups worth of 12 cups of caffeine, cups of coffee worth of caffeine in the day. Maybe that's why the Stoke was so high. I was just uber caffeinated. But yeah, so I was putting down 200 calories an hour from goo and drinking drinking their electrolyte mix. So I would pop 4 of those tablets into 60 ounces of water and drink that finish that basically every 7 miles. So I don't know, a couple hours.
Okay.
And then I would take a salt tab every hour, starting at the 3rd hour. And on the north side, I drank a can of Coke. I had some pickles. I ate some chips and some blueberries, which somebody pointed out were a complete waste of space. They're so low in calories. And an Epic Bar beef jerky stick. So And then I had 7 picky bars throughout the day. Like I said, 5 of them were during the run, and 2 of them, one of them was at the beginning of the day, and one of them was at the end of the day. And so I think I consumed about 4,000 calories on the run, which is my watch told me I burned 5,200 or something like that. So I feel like I did a decent job of like replenishing what I was burning.
Yeah.
We ran for just under 13 hours. And the only time that I struggled was at hour 11 when I was looking at this gel that was in my hand. I was like, I don't want to eat another damn thing. I don't want to eat another one of these. And I was like, I'm screwed because I've got, 5 uphill miles to go. So at that point, I just switched to their chews. I had been alternating between the waffles and the gels, but I hadn't really gotten into the chews yet. So, hour 11, you start eating candy, and it's a game changer. So I basically, besides the 11 to 12 hour stretch, I had a gel. I had like 2 gels an hour, or a gel and a waffle every hour, and my energy levels were pretty consistent throughout as a result.
Cool. So was that according to a plan, or was that going off of feel? And then
Yeah,
also before
yeah. Yep,
before you
go
hop
ahead.
into that, and then also, why did you add these salt tabs?
So yes, that was a plan. It's I talked with their sports nutrition team in the past, and that's what they suggest.
Okay.
The salt, because I've had cramping issues before, and I really wanted to avoid that. It wasn't as hot as I was expecting, but you're still sweating a ton, and I am a very salty sweater.
Okay.
So I finished runs, and my face has been just like pure white from the salt.
Yeah.
It's really disgusting. Um, and so I was trying to avoid that, and I mostly did for the most part. And I was glad I had the salt tabs because maybe at like mile 35, I passed this guy who was like struggling really hard. I didn't know who he was, but I started a conversation with him, and he was like, "Yeah, man, I'm like cramping really hard." I was like, "Hey, you want some salt tabs?" He's like, "There's nothing I would like more than some salt tabs right now." So I gave him a couple. Um, so it was good to have those on board. But yeah, it worked really well.
Cool. So how did you determine to have the salt tabs on top of the electrolytes? I'm just curious, like how that whole, because you mentioned you already taking electrolytes from the
Right.
Roctanes, and then also in your pack, right, or in your water source.
Yeah, so maybe it was overkill. I don't know. It was something that had worked for me in the past.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, I had spoken with a couple of dietitians about fueling and um, making a plan. So it was semi-educated, and also it was half an educated decision, half experiential based. Knowing that on my 5 hour runs, this combination had worked. Whereas I had done 4 hour runs and didn't use salt tabs, and maybe had some cramping. But I also think that the training has an impact on the cramping, and
Sure.
often cramping can be fueling related, but it also can be exposing some sort of weakness or muscular weakness. So I did a lot of hill training, and I think that also helped on adventure day.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you manage your water?
So we went at a time when we got lucky because all of the water options were on. As it gets colder, they freeze and break, or they just break because they're super old pipes going into a canyon that's rarely serviced. So yeah, we had water at mile 6.5, probably mile 8, 12, 17, 22, and then the reverse.
Wow.
So we were pretty much really the only stretch where I carried more than the 60 ounces in the Nathan vest pack was when you climb. So there's a place called Phantom Ranch. So there are a bunch of campgrounds in the base of the canyon, and so you can stop at them and get fuel, or there's one where you buy lemonade. That's the thing to do. But they all have water, and so there's one called Phantom Ranch, which is 6.5 miles from the South Rim, or 7 miles from the South Rim, and that's the first one you hit, and then that's the last one you hit if you go up the South Kaibab Trail. So there are two options out of the South Rim. You can go down Bright Angel, where there are water stops every 3 miles, or you can go South Kaibab, where the first water stop is about 7 miles in. So everyone warns you that you must fill up at Phantom Ranch if you're going up South Kaibab, because that 7 mile climb can take you 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours, because you're going up 5,000 feet. We moved at a 25-minute mile pace to put it in context, and that was max effort. So I carried 60 ounces in the pack, and then the vest I had two handheld, or not handheld, two 12-ounce bottles on the front. So I carried, that much water out, because if you take 4 hours, you're going to need 80 ounces of water.
Sure.
So I drank most of it, because the air is so dry, and you just get cotton mouth. And you just want to drink as much water as you can, and I did, and I was fortunate. But everyone warns you, like, carry as much as you possibly can out of Phantom Ranch. So I carried these two bottles with me the whole time, but I didn't fill them up until that last water stop.
Okay. So as you're heading up this last hill climb and you peak the top and you've made it, what's your body feel like at that point?
Euphoria again. So I felt good for 38 miles. And at mile 32 or 33, we were clipping off like 7 and 8 minute miles.
Wow.
And I was like, man, I was running with my friend Tony at the time. I was like, man, Tony, we're going to pay for this. And we did. Because those last 7 miles are just brutal. And so when you ask, how did you feel climbing out, it was a mix of like, oh my God, that was the most physically taxing thing I've ever done. I think it was harder than running the marathon, from a mental and physical standpoint. People ask, like, where did it set in that it was going to be difficult? Like, was it a mile into the climb? Was it 2 miles? It was like 2 strides into the climb. So I'm sort of backing up to paint the picture of like this euphoria of coming out of it. So I took a video of myself at mile 34, basically thanking David for all the training and belief and all that stuff. I was on cloud 9. Tony was on cloud 9. And we were just so hyped. Fast forward 10 miles. This is the worst I've ever felt running. And okay, maybe not the worst. The second worst I'd ever felt running. And so I look at these two videos back to back, separated by 10 miles. And it was fascinating because the first one was like as high as I possibly could be. And the second one was just about as low as I could possibly be. And I was talking to my phone, like basically to distract myself. But I was so happy I did it, because I can capture and play back this like when I'm at my worst, yeah. What does it look like? Yeah. And I was saying to the recording, I was like, there's no other option but to keep going. That's it. Like but that's life. That's life. That's training. That's running. That's blah, blah, blah. You just got to keep going. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is such shit in this moment. And I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other and just keep doing it for the next 5,000 feet of climbing. So as you continue to climb, you start to see the rim, and you can turn around and look at the sun setting. And I'll tell you, the feeling of looking back and seeing where you've come since sunrise, I was just like, oh my God, we we came from there. We did that. We haven't been here in 10 hours, 12 hours. So there's a spot called Ooh Point, which is about a mile from, I think it's a mile from the south rim up Kaibab. And it's called Ooh Point because the view is incredible. The sun was setting, and I'm sure that was one of the photos you've seen. And it's just like it was in that moment that I said to my friend Tony, and like we had run the last 22 miles together. I was like, Tony, we're doing it, and we're about to do it. It's about to be done. And this was the longest he'd ever run. This is the longest a lot of us had ever run. And we just kept going. And we get out of the this is my favorite part of all of it. We get out of the canyon. We high five. There were 3 of us at this point. We high five. We do some screaming, blah, blah, blah. And then we're like, all right, man, it's cold up here. Like, now what? So we learned that there is a bus probably a few minutes away. And we decided, okay, we got to take this bus. We don't have any cell coverage. We can't call our friends to say, hey, come pick us up. We had basically separated into a couple different packs. So some people had finished, some people were still out there. So the bus shows up, sun goes down, it's cold. We had been running for 13 hours. I was starving. I sit down, I open a picky bar on the bus. I'm sitting right behind the bus driver. She turns around and goes, son, there's no eating on the bus. I'm like, ma'am, thank you for driving us here. I've just been running for the last 45 miles. I'm like really hungry. And she just looks at me in the rearview mirror like, there's no eating on the bus. And it was like it was so fucking perfect. It was like nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares what you just did. In the grand scheme of things, like, who cares? It was this major accomplishment that we were so proud of, but the rest of the world just doesn't care. And it was really cool to think about it in that way, because it's like we set these like massive expectations for ourselves, and we set these massive goals, and people are really disappointed when they don't hit their goals. But at the end of the day, you're the only one that cares. And I think that just like that experience removed like tons and tons of pressure from me, like going forward, because it's so personal. And this bus driver couldn't care less that I had run 45 miles to that point, and that I really just wanted to eat the picky bar. I ate the picky bar.
Good. You're like, what are you going to do? Kick me off the bus?
Yeah, let me make this clear. I ate the picky bar because, I was that hungry. I just did it in a quiet way. But no, at the end of the day, it's like you're doing all this stuff for yourself and for the betterment of yourself, and so that you can, be better for those around you. But these massive goals that people set, or these like risks that people take, whatever, at the end of the day, like, you just have to please yourself.
Yeah.
And I say this all the time. Yeah, maybe it's related, maybe it's not, but when you get on an airplane and they say put your mask on first before helping those around you, like, at the end of the day, like, you can't help other people if you don't help yourself. So do these big, wild, awesome things, and then just move on. Like, if failures don't define you, then successes don't either. And so just take it as a learning experience, the whole thing. And I thought that experience of her saying a second time, no eating on the bus, was like the most perfect summation of the whole day.
Oh, I love it, man. And I've got to say, though, I think that, you doing things like this is a huge inspiration for people. So whether or not, I get where you're coming from, but man, you're inspiring me right now to go out and do these things. So I appreciate that you're going and pushing these limits so that people like myself can, run on your heels and try them after you've already shown us the way.
Yeah, and I think that's the like at the end of the day, like that's what it's all about. Um, I lost my grandfather this summer, and one of the things that he said to me before he passed was basically life is all about um, leaving the world a better place than you came in. And if you can do the basically exactly what you like, exactly what you shared is like that would make him so happy to hear you say that. Um, that's like what he lived for,
Yeah.
and that's like what I live for. And like, there's no better compliment than something like that. Um, and I thought about him a lot on that run, and um, that's perfect. I don't have any more words than that. Sorry.
Well, it's all good. Keep up the good work, man. But to break that a little bit, what was the first non-running meal you ate afterwards?
We went to there's like a little village in the campground that we were in, and I ate. I think it was chicken and fish and potatoes and rice and vegetables, and it was delicious. And then I didn't stop eating for hours, and I took snacks to bed with me.
Nice.
Just kept eating, and I kept eating them because I couldn't fall asleep because I was so sore already. We were camping, so I'm like laying on the cold ground or laying on the ground, just like thinking about how sore my quads already were.
Oh no, you camped after that?
Yeah, I don't recommend that at all.
Oh man, you should have let me know and I'd driven my van over. You could have slept on the bed in the van.
Yeah, there were 17 of us, so it would have been a little tight quarters, but at least we would have stayed warm.
Yeah.
Then we had some beers, and everybody was drunk after a beer and a half, so it's pretty
I bet.
funny.
I bet.
We had some support from Sufferfest, and she was my friend Margaret was like, "Yeah, you should have 2 to 3 beers for everyone," and we were like pretty good on the 1.5 to 2 beer range. But yeah, it was super fun. We had a little campfire and all that stuff, and yeah, it was a really cool scene.
Nice. So selfishly, and I'm guessing that other people would like to know this as well, you mentioned earlier that you had some foods and supplements that you took in order to repair your muscles faster. And I know that like ideally we'd like everybody to go out and test Inside Tracker. So they absolutely should, and I recommend it to everybody. But do you have any of these hacks that you could share that worked for you?
Yeah, so we'll start with food. So Brazil nuts are sort of a miracle recovery food. I learned this while sitting in on a call with one of our dietitians and one of our athletes. Um, I guess 2 nuts have the RDA of selenium, which is an essential nutrient for muscle repair and muscle recovery. So was eating those all week. Fish and other, olive oil and other healthy fats and things like that. It was a great excuse to have sushi twice that week. So I definitely did that. Avocado is another good food. And then getting into the supplements, magnesium, again, to help with muscle repair. I knew my vitamin D level was fine, so that's helping as well. And then 2 that I hadn't taken before that popped up as recommendations were CoQ10,
Okay.
ALA, which I couldn't find, and what's the other one? Curcumin.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the curcumin, or I've been taking the curcumin and the CoQ10 to address the super high levels of HSCRP, which is inflammation, and the elevated liver enzymes. And same thing with I've been taking a probiotic as well. Um, so yeah, so that sort of cocktail of foods and supplements have left me feeling good. And I did my first workout today, um, and it was pretty similar in terms of paces to an easier version of what I did 10 days out from the canyon. So David has me do a hard workout, or the hardest workout, 10 days out of race day or whatever day. So it's cool to compare that to a harder version today and see similar paces. So I know it worked because I feel good, and I'm able to perform as well. And the stoke is super high. Most importantly.
Oh man, absolutely. I think the stoke meter is probably really important after a big event like that, because
Yeah,
you could
for
just
sure.
feel trashed if.
Yes. Well, I sure did. I certainly did feel trashed. It was definitely a fun experience to drive for 4 hours and then fly for 5. But um, yeah, the recovery has gone really well.
Cool. Is there anything that you would change if you did it again?
Yeah, I wouldn't camp. um, yeah, I mean, we got pretty lucky with having somebody meet us at the north side. Um, it's a 220-mile drive or a 22-mile run, 21-mile run. So it takes roughly the same amount of time to get from side to side. So you have to have like a really awesome friend who's willing to do something like that. Basically drive for 10 to 12 hours that day. I really think the only thing I would do differently, besides putting horse blinders on for the first 7 miles, would be not camping the night after or the night before. Yeah, I think that's it. It was like pretty ideal otherwise.
Did you camp the night before too?
Yeah.
Oh man.
This is embarrassing. It was my first time ever camping.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, I mean, sleeping on the ground. Did you have a good sleeping pad at least?
The sleeping pad was great, but I'm such a rookie that I slept like it wasn't flat and I slept the wrong way. Yeah. And then I was in a tent with a friend and I didn't want to wake him up. So I didn't change it. So I just slept like with all the blood pooled to my head the first night.
Yep.
I wouldn't do that.
Right. So for all of you guys listening that haven't, slept in a tent before, you want your head uphill if you are on a slope.
Didn't do that. Yeah. Fun fact.
Yep. Or if you're in an RV or sleeping in a car, that also applies. But
yes. Or a bed.
Or there you go. Yeah, or if your bed
got an insane slope to your apartment, you never know.
You do never know.
Should move if so.
Well, Jonathan, this has been fantastic. Is there anything that that you think that you should cover before we go that we haven't really talked about?
No, I think that like the message that I just want to get out is like do things that scare you and do them. It's better with friends. So do things that scare you with friends. Take that
absolutely. As you will. Oh man, I love it and I appreciate the time. Where can people find more about you, follow you, subscribe to your podcast, all that stuff?
So I'm JW Levitt, Levitt, on Instagram and Twitter. The podcast is called For the Long Run, and it's available on Apple, Spotify, basically anywhere you find podcasts or listen to.
Cool. Well, man, I appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll have you on again and keep doing awesome stuff, and we'll keep following it, and I'll keep being inspired and try and do it as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe.
You bet, man. We'll talk soon. Hey guys, that was my interview of Jonathan Levitt on the Rim to Rim to Rim Grand Canyon Adventure Trail Run. If that doesn't get you fired up to go out and do some crazy stuff, I don't know what does, because every time that I hear a story like that, I get fired up to go and do something just like it. And I've got to say that Rim to Rim to Rim is definitely been added to my list of runs/adventures that I am going to do for sure. So I've got to thank Jonathan for going out and doing it, setting up, the excitement around it and accomplishing things so that he can inspire people like myself and people like you that are listening and watching this to go out and do some really cool things. So I highly recommend that you follow Jonathan on social media and check out his podcast For the Long Run. It's excellent stuff. And remember, if you would like to get yourself $200 off an Inside Tracker Ultimate test, which is the test that we do regularly, now's the time. All you have to do is go to InsideTracker.com and use the code Cheers All Around Joe. That's no spaces, one word, Cheers All Around Joe, and you will get yourself $200 off an Inside Tracker Ultimate package. it is something that you all should be doing if you haven't got that from listening to the podcast already. So if you guys have any questions, if you need anything, let me know. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube or iTunes or your favorite podcasting station. And if you like this podcast, we would love it if you would give us a review. We're getting ourselves so close to 100 5-star reviews, and we would love it if you would help contribute to that number. So, like I said, if you need anything, I'm here for you, and I will talk to you soon. The All Around Joe podcast, where we optimize your human performance from my personal experience as an athlete, coach, and all-around self-improvement junkie.